Have you ever woken up on a quiet Sunday, opened your banking app out of habit, and discovered $135,000 just gone? That was me. No tears, no screaming, just numb shock and a finger-tapping screenshot. The truth? My mom drained my entire savings to buy my sister a brand new car. No warning, no apology. Just, "You don't even drive, sweetie." I'm not a lawyer. I'm a freelancer who tracked every cent I ever earned. And when I asked questions, they called me ungrateful, but I documented everything. I took it to court and I won. Because family doesn't mean forfeiting your future. In this video, I'll show you exactly how I stood up, legally and emotionally, when my trust was stolen in the name of love. If you've ever felt like your silence was mistaken for permission, you need to watch this. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way I can send you a special shout out. Now, let's begin our story together. I unlocked my phone with a thumb that still bore the faint dent of sleep, balancing a chipped mug of coffee in my other hand. It was a quiet Sunday, and the apartment smelled faintly of toasted cinnamon and old hardwood. My couch, a faded blue hand-me-down with a crooked armrest, sighed under my weight as I sank into it. I opened the banking app like I always did, a habit more than a necessity, mostly to reassure myself. I knew the number that would be there, had known it for years. It was a quiet point of pride, that balance, not flashy, not obscene, but solid. Mine. The screen loaded. I blinked. Then I blinked again. $2,641.09. No, that couldn't be right. I hit refresh, waited, same number. The number that used to sit there, my number, was $137,821.16. I knew it down to the 16 cents because I tracked it like a hawk. Every invoice I sent, every freelance gig, every time I said no to a weekend trip or a new pair of boots or even takeout, I froze. Then, with deliberate calm, I tapped through the transaction history. One withdrawal, one lump sum, $135,000. Gone. Transferred 5 days ago to Cascadia Motors, LLC, a car dealership. My chest tightened, not in a panicked way, but in that slow, clamping way grief hits when you're too numb to cry. The room didn't move. It just shifted, like I'd suddenly realized the floor wasn't real. Mom once told me, over meatloaf and mashed potatoes on a rainy Thursday, that I didn't have to worry about money because family takes care of family. She said it in that sing-song way she used when she didn't want me to argue. I guess I should have asked her to define take care of. I grabbed my laptop, pulled up the spreadsheet I kept. Rainy Day Fund, I'd named it when I was 23, and decided I never wanted to depend on anyone, especially not after watching Haley max out credit cards and charm her way into extensions, promising she'd figure it out later. The transfer was real. The timestamp, the authorization, the dealer name, it was all there. I clicked on the bank's help chat. After 5 robotic messages, it pushed me to call. The hold music was peppy in a cruel way. Flutes and tambourines dancing behind a recorded voice thanking me for my patience. After 12 minutes, a teller picked up. "This is Allie with Northern Pines Credit Union. How can I assist you today?" I gave my name, my member number, the details. She paused. "Yes, I see the transfer. It was initiated with a power of attorney on file. The signer is Lynette Linwood." My mom. I didn't speak. I couldn't yet. "Allie," I said finally, "what kind of power of attorney allows someone to take nearly every penny from an account?" "It's a full financial power of attorney," she said, "filed with your joint membership form in 2014. I barely remembered signing that. Back when I was starting community college and Mom said she'd help me set everything up, I trusted her. I didn't read the fine print. "Is there any way to reverse it?" "I'm afraid not, ma'am. The transaction is complete. I recommend speaking with your representative if you believe this was an abuse of authority." "Thanks," I said, and hung up before she could say anything else. The air felt too still, too polite, like it hadn't caught on yet. I stared at the phone for a long time before hitting Mom's contact. It rang twice. "Hey, sweetie," she answered, cheerful like nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" "Mom." My voice came out steady but lower. "Did you buy a car?" There was a pause, just enough. "Oh, yes, we did." For Haley, you know, her old one was just falling apart. She couldn't get to work. I closed my eyes. "You used my money." "Well, technically, sweetheart, it was in a shared account. You know we always said what's ours is yours and vice versa." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "You said that. I never did." Silence. Then her voice chipper again. "Look, Rachel, it's just money. You're doing fine. Haley really needed a fresh start, and you don't even drive." I couldn't believe she said that, like responsibility meant forfeiture. "I was saving that money," I said, more to myself than her. "Oh, honey, you're so responsible. You'll make it back in no time. You always land on your feet." I didn't argue. I just hung up. The quiet returned. Not peaceful, vacant. I should have felt something dramatic. Anger, betrayal, grief. But all I felt was hollow. Like the part of me that used to hope my parents would treat me like more than a reliable emergency fund had quietly packed its bags and slipped out the back door. I opened Instagram, not even sure why, just muscle memory. Haley's story was the first to pop up. A boomerang, her laughing behind the wheel of a gleaming Audi Q5. The caption read, "Fresh starts, blessed. Family comes first." I stared at the image, her nails perfectly done, the sunlight catching the shimmer on her sunglasses, the leather seats, the showroom sparkle, my money. I didn't cry, I didn't throw my phone, I didn't text her or scream or post anything vague and dramatic. I opened my rainy day fund folder and started saving screenshots. Then I opened a new document, titled it, "Timeline of Unauthorized Access." That was how it began. Not with rage, not with a fight, just with the quiet decision to document, because something inside me whispered that if I didn't start now, I might never get the chance to reclaim what was mine. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what family really meant, when trust wasn't sacred, just convenient. I didn't ask for much, just an explanation. But instead of answers, I got blamed for asking the question. It had been a quiet drive from Portland to Beaverton, the kind where the silence didn't feel peaceful, just packed, the kind that sat heavy in your chest like a held breath. I brought a small pie, apple cinnamon, store-bought, out of habit more than thoughtfulness. That's what we did in this family. We showed up with things instead of feelings. Mom greeted me at the door like nothing had happened. "Take off your shoes. I just cleaned the floors," she said, already turning back toward the kitchen. Inside, the house was just as I remembered, pristine, coordinated, and emotionally sterile. The autumn-themed placemats were already on the table, burnt orange, deep red, little felt leaves tucked under crystal salad bowls. It looked like a Hallmark card, and it felt just as scripted. Dinner was roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. It could have been Thanksgiving for how formal everything looked, but there were only 4 plates and no one was feeling thankful. We sat in our usual spots, Mom at the head, Dad to her right, me to her left, and Haley across from me. She wore a cropped sweater, gold rings on each finger, and the smug look of someone who had just been told she deserved more than she earned. I waited until the plates were filled, napkins in laps, forks poised. Then I spoke. "So?" I checked with the bank. The clinking of silverware paused, just briefly. I saw where the money went. Mom didn't look up. "We needed it," she said, as if she were talking about borrowing a rake from the neighbors. "It was my savings," I said, keeping my voice level. "Under my name, since I was 18. She finally looked at me. "Rachel, it's family money. Your father and I put that away for you, and when Haley needed it more, She didn't need it more, I cut in, trying to steady my hands. She wanted a new car. That's not the same. Haley rolled her eyes. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. You live in a nice apartment. You've got clients. I'm starting over. You're always starting over, Haley, I said quietly. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. That's when Dad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. He didn't say anything, just slid it across the glass table toward me. I picked it up. Inside were photocopies of an old custodial agreement from a credit union back when I was a teenager. It had their names as the original account holders, mine listed as a minor. They were supposed to transfer it fully to me at 18, I said, more to myself than anyone. Mom smiled, the kind of tight smile that never reached the eyes. We never got around to updating the paperwork, but that money wouldn't even exist if we hadn't started it. I looked up from the papers. You knew this was illegal. Dad shifted in his seat. His eyes dropped to his plate. For a second, just one, I saw something there. Shame, maybe, or regret. Mom, though, didn't flinch. So what are you going to do? She asked, voice calm, cold. Sue your own parents? It landed in the room like a dare. I didn't respond. Not right away. I looked over at Haley, who had pulled out her phone and was scrolling through it like none of this mattered. I wanted to yell. I wanted to cry. But instead, I stood up slowly, folded the papers back into the envelope, and placed it in my purse. I'm not hungry, I said. Dad looked like he wanted to say something. He didn't. As I slipped my coat on in the hallway, I heard Mom's voice from the dining room. You're being ungrateful, Rachel. We've done everything for you. Outside, the night was cold and clear. The porch light flickered once before going out. I didn't look back. Back in the car, I sat for a long time without turning the engine on. My hands were clenched in my lap, but I didn't even realize it until they started to ache. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant, that they didn't see me as separate from them. Not really. My independence had been an illusion they allowed as long as it didn't get in their way. For a long time, I believed love looked like sacrifice. But sitting there in the dark, envelope beside me, I realized something else. Sometimes love looks like letting go of what breaks you, and sometimes family is just another story we outgrow. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. It was time to start making a list, names, dates, documents, not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted clarity, because I wanted my life back, and I knew now no one else was going to give it to me. I didn't walk into the law office for revenge. I walked in because I couldn't keep swallowing what they fed me and call it love. The sky over Portland was its usual shade of gray when I stepped out of my car, umbrella trembling slightly in my hand from a mix of cold and nerves. The street smelled like damp pavement and wet leaves. I stood outside the law office for a moment, staring at the name etched into the glass door, Tran and Associates. My reflection blinked back at me, pale, determined, a little tired. Inside, the office was all clean lines and quiet warmth, a single shelf of law books, potted fiddle leaf figs, degrees in tidy black frames. Rain tapped gently at the tall windows, almost rhythmically, like the universe was breathing with me. Ms. Linwood? A voice called softly. A woman in her late 20s, legal assistant probably, smiled and gestured for me to follow her. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Ellis Tran was seated behind a smooth walnut desk, dressed in a charcoal suit with no tie. He looked up from his laptop and offered a calm, measured smile. Rachel, thanks for coming in. I nodded and sat, trying not to grip my tote bag like a lifeline. I read through the materials you sent, he said gently. Your documentation is thorough. I've always been a note-taker, I said, managing a weak smile. My hands stayed in my lap. It's how I process. Ellis nodded once, then leaned slightly forward. Before we go further, I want to make sure you understand something. This is going to get personal and public. Family cases like this, they ripple. I know, I said, but they already took something from me. I won't let them take silence too. He opened a file folder. I recognized the printouts. Bank statements, transaction logs, even a screenshot of Haley's Instagram post with the Audi. You were listed as a minor when the account was opened, he said, but the documents show the account transitioned to your sole name when you turned 18. Legally, that money was yours. I nodded, heart thudding quietly behind my ribs. There's precedent for cases like this, he continued. We'll file under civil misappropriation of funds, possibly seek damages. It won't be criminal, but it will send a message. What happens to them? I asked, the question tasting bitter even as I said it. Worst case, they're ordered to repay. No jail, just consequences. I exhaled, the sound too loud in the soft office. Okay, let's proceed. Ellis nodded to his assistant, who returned with a stack of forms. I scanned the first page. Legal language, case numbers, filing terms. My name typed at the top in bold. My fingers trembled slightly as I signed. Not from fear, from knowing this was the moment I stepped over a line I'd always told myself I never would. That night, I started voice journaling. My old college roommate had suggested it years ago, back when I couldn't sleep through midterms and bottled everything. You don't have to make sense, she'd said. Just say it out loud. So I did. Sitting on my thrifted couch, I whispered into my phone. I filed a lawsuit today, against Mom and Dad. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just signed. I thought it would feel bigger, like a thunderclap. But it was quiet, like a door clicking shut. 3 days later, they got the notice. Lynette called first. I didn't pick up, but the voicemail came in fast, crackling with fury. You ungrateful child, she snapped. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. You think lawyers make you better than blood. I listened once, then deleted it. Haley didn't call. Of course she didn't. Then came the text, a group message titled, Family Threads. My aunts, cousins, a few old numbers I hadn't saved in years. Can't believe you're doing this to your mom. Nothing else. No context. Just that. Then, silence. I stared at the message for a long time, not because I didn't expect it, but because somewhere deep down I'd hoped someone, anyone, might have asked what happened first. Instead, they closed ranks. It felt like being erased while still breathing. I muted the thread. Not because I didn't care, but because, for the first time, I cared more about me. Ellis and I scheduled a follow-up for the next week. He explained the timeline, possible responses from the other side, what discovery would look like. I nodded, took notes, tried to keep my voice even. You're doing something hard, he said as I packed up my things. I'm doing something necessary, I corrected. He smiled at that. Not big, just enough. Before I left, he handed me a printed quote on thick cardstock. Not a legal document, just a piece of paper. In this life, boundaries don't mean you stop loving people. They mean you start loving yourself more. I tucked it into my notebook. That night, in my journal, I whispered a new truth. They told me I was breaking the family apart, but the truth is, it was already broken. I'm just the only one who finally stopped pretending. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. There was a time I believed silence meant safety, that if I kept my head down, didn't stir the pot, people would remember who I really was, steady, responsible, the one who picked up the broken pieces. But this chapter of my life was teaching me something colder. Silence is a blank page, and people will write whatever story suits them best. The rain hadn't let up in 3 days. Portland's winter made everything feel more distant, like even the light had stopped trying. I was sitting in a corner booth at a coffee shop near Hawthorne, one of those places with mismatched mugs and acoustic jazz humming low. The kind where the barista wears a beanie year-round and you never quite know if they're being ironic. I liked it here. No one asked questions. Megan walked in 5 minutes late, shaking water from her umbrella. Her hair had grown out since the last time I saw her, looser curls now tucked behind one ear. She spotted me, offered a small wave, and slid into the seat across from mine. "Hey," she said. Just that, soft and simple. I nodded. "Hey." There was a moment where we both looked out the window, letting the hum of conversation and steam from our mugs carry the silence. Then Megan reached into her tote bag and pulled out her phone. "I didn't come to upset you," she began, "but I think you need to see what's being said." My stomach tightened. She opened her gallery, tapped on a few screenshots, and pushed the phone toward me. It was a group chat, one of the big ones, the kind that spanned cousins and in-laws and half-siblings you only saw at funerals. At first it was Lynette's messages that stood out. "She's not well." I mean, who sues their own family unless something's really wrong? She always kept to herself. I don't think she ever understood what family really means. Then came the replies. Aunt Jenna, Uncle Ray, even that cousin from Colorado I hadn't spoken to since my 20s, agreeing, speculating, tacking on their own subtle digs. She was always too serious. She never came to Haley's art shows. I guess some people just aren't built for loyalty. I blinked hard, willing myself not to react, but the words dug deep anyway, not because I believed them, but because once upon a time, these people knew me. And now, they had rewritten me into a stranger, a threat. Megan handed me a napkin. I hadn't noticed I'd been gripping the edge of my mug so tightly, my knuckles turned pale. She gave me a sad smile. "There's more," she said, and I braced myself. A screenshot of Haley's Instagram story. Her in yoga pants sipping a green smoothie, text overlaid, surviving toxic siblings, one deep breath at a time. Another from a Facebook event, an invitation to our cousin's baby shower. "Please respect this space. Let's keep things light and drama-free." My name wasn't even mentioned, just excluded. I finally set my coffee down. "So that's it," I said. "I'm the villain now." "No," Megan said, her voice firm for the first time. "You're the one who said no. That scares people." I didn't know what hurt more, being falsely painted as unstable or realizing how fast people believe lies when they fit the story they want to hear. That night, back in my apartment, I deactivated my Facebook. I stopped checking the old family threads, archived the baby shower invite, muted the group chat where someone had once sent me graduation balloons. Instead, I opened a new note on my phone and titled it Boundaries. The first entry, "Love that requires silence isn't love at all." Therapy had been a quiet step, a referral from Ellis, just a few sessions so far, but I found myself looking forward to that hour each week. I didn't say much at first, mostly listened to the ticking clock and stared at the ceiling. But last week, when the therapist asked what I wanted out of all this, I'd said to stop feeling like I'm the one who broke something. She just nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Now, as I stared at my laptop, one last email pinged in. It was from Uncle Ben, short and strangely polite. "Will always love you, Rachel. But this has become too much for the family. Please understand." I closed the laptop slowly, sat with the quiet, then whispered aloud, more to myself than anyone else. "I don't need them to believe me. I just need to believe myself." Outside, the rain had eased to a whisper. Inside, for the first time in a while, so had my heart. They smiled like nothing was wrong. My mother adjusted her pearl earrings like she was headed to brunch, not to court. My father sat beside her with his hands folded and his gaze fixed on the floor, a man suddenly fascinated by tile grout. And Haley wore a soft gray sweater, her hair in a loose braid, like a college sophomore giving a poetry reading. I sat there, gripping the edge of the table in front of me, like it was the only solid thing left in the room. I arrived 20 minutes early, wearing the navy blazer I'd used for every job interview after grad school. My shoes were sensible, but I still felt them pinch with every step I took across the marble floor of Multnomah County Family Court. The hallway buzzed with the low murmur of whispered consultations and distant coughs. Fluorescent lights made everything look too clean, too exposed. I kept my eyes forward. Ellis Tran met me just outside the courtroom, calm, composed, a soft confidence in the way he tucked a pen behind his ear. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Inside, it was cold, not just from the temperature, but from the silence, the kind that makes your heartbeat feel like it's echoing in your throat. The judge entered and everyone stood. I felt like a schoolgirl again, standing to recite a speech I didn't want to give. Lynette's attorney, a woman named Deborah with a crisp navy suit and a voice like polished glass, was the first to speak. She used words like family assets, mutual understanding, and informal expectations. She smiled as she described the withdrawn money not as theft, but as a matter of familial trust, emphasizing that Haley had needed the support during a difficult chapter in her life. I could feel the muscles in my jaw tighten. Ellis remained unfazed. When it was our turn, he started by calmly laying out a timeline. The savings account, opened when I was 15, the work I'd done over the years, the freelance income, the custodial documents showing full transfer of ownership to me at age 18. He handed over bank records, email correspondence, and printouts of my budget spreadsheets. I watched the judge skim the pages, his brow furrowing. Then came Haley's testimony. She walked slowly to the stand, clutching a tissue like a prop. Her voice trembled in all the right places. "She's always been the golden child," Haley said. "Mom and Dad gave her everything. I was just trying to stay afloat." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. Then it was my turn. I stood, walked to the stand, and tried to remember every breathing technique I'd learned in therapy. My palms were cold, my mouth dry. But when I opened it, the words came. "I started saving when I was 17, I said. "Every part-time job, every skipped vacation, every freelance check, I put it into that account. I paid taxes, I kept receipts. I wasn't asked, I wasn't consulted. I was just taken from." The courtroom was silent. "I never said no to helping my family," I continued, "but I always believed love should be offered, not expected, and certainly not stolen." I looked toward the bench. The judge didn't nod. He didn't smile. But I saw something shift in his expression, a small crease in his forehead that hadn't been there before. We broke for 10 minutes. I sat in the hallway, elbows on knees, staring at the tiled floor like it held answers. Ellis placed a bottle of water beside me and said nothing. Sometimes silence is more comforting than any rehearsed line. When we were called back in, the judge began with the words I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath for. After reviewing the documentation and testimonies, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The sum of $135,000 is to be repaid in full to Ms. Rachel Linwood. Case closed. I didn't exhale. I didn't move. I just sat there, as if my body hadn't caught up to the moment yet. Lynette didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just stood, adjusted her jacket, and walked out like she had somewhere better to be. As she passed me, her eyes caught mine, cold, sharp, not hurt, furious. Frank trailed behind her, slower, almost reluctant. His gaze met mine for a second. Then he looked away. I left the courtroom last. Outside, the spring air smelled like damp concrete and cherry blossoms. Ellis walked beside me without saying much until we reached the steps. "Some wins are quiet," he finally said. "That's how you know they're yours." I nodded, unsure whether what I felt was relief or grief. Maybe both. Because I didn't feel victorious. I felt released. And yet, as I stood there watching my parents disappear into the parking lot, I knew this wasn't over for her. Not in her mind. Lynette would never accept what had happened. But I wasn't walking this path for her acceptance anymore. I was walking it for me. They offered me dinner and a smile. I gave them silence. The card came in the mail one Tuesday afternoon, nestled between a utility bill and an ad for window blinds. Plain ivory envelope. Familiar handwriting. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. On the front, in Lynette's looping cursive, Rachel. Inside, I imagined something vague and polished. Something like, "We'd like to talk this through," or "Family is too important to lose." I didn't need to read it. I just slipped it into the bottom drawer of my desk under a stack of old receipts and shut it without ceremony. That summer, the sun stayed late in the sky. My new apartment in Selwood had a little balcony, big enough for a chair, a side table, and a single potted lavender plant that I watered every morning while my coffee brewed. It wasn't fancy, just one bedroom, some mismatched dishes, and a second-hand record player. But it was mine. No one else's name on the lease. No money I had to explain. 1 week after the card arrived, I bought a car. Not a new one. Nothing with leather seats or a monthly payment that would whisper guilt into my ear every time I turned the ignition. Just a gently used silver Honda Civic. Clean title. No frills. I wrote the check myself. The dealer, a man in his late 50s with laugh lines and grease under his nails, handed me the keys like he was passing on something sacred. "Reliable little thing," he said, "and take care of her and she'll do right by you." I smiled. That's all I need. Megan came over the next evening. She brought cookies, oatmeal raisin, the kind I always pretend not to like but finish anyway, and a bottle of red wine with a handwritten label. "Gift from a neighbor," she said, "or a bribe to keep me from playing saxophone on the balcony again. Jury's out." We sat outside as the sky softened, orange melting into pink behind the trees. Somewhere down the street, someone was grilling. Music drifted faintly from an upstairs window. Jazz, maybe Coltrane or Davis. I let it wash over me. Megan nudged the plate of cookies toward me. "You know," she said, "you don't owe anyone a resolution. Sometimes surviving is the story." I nodded. I used to think closure meant they'd apologize, or at least admit they were wrong, but maybe it's just not needing them to. She raised her glass. To that. We toasted. We laughed. And for the first time in what felt like years, the sound came from deep in my chest, not brittle or forced, but full. Real. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table with the windows open. A breeze moved through the curtains. My lavender plant swayed gently in its pot. I lit a candle and opened my journal. The last time I'd written anything, it was to list damages for Ellis. Now I let the pen move without purpose. Lines, thoughts, nothing structured. Then, just one sentence. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about return. Returning to myself. A soft ding from my phone broke the stillness. It was an email from Ellis. Final invoice cleared. You're all done. I stared at the message for a moment. No confetti, no fanfare, just those simple words, and yet they hit harder than anything else had. I was done. Not just legally, not just financially, emotionally. The weight was still there, in traces, like the way your skin feels after peeling off a tight sweater. But there was space now, room to breathe. I didn't reply to Lynette's card, didn't write back, didn't call. There was nothing left to say, and even if there was, it wasn't mine to speak anymore. Some things don't get healed. They just get named and then left behind. I stood up, walked to the window, and reached for the little watering can. The lavender didn't need much, just enough to keep growing, just enough to bloom. And me? I didn't feel powerful. I felt whole. And that was enough. Sometimes freedom doesn't come with applause. It arrives quietly, in the form of a used Honda Civic, a handwritten journal entry, and a lavender plant on the windowsill. What I learned is this. Family isn't about shared blood. It's about mutual respect. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away from what hurts, even if it shares your last name. If this story made you reflect on your own journey with family, I'd love to hear it. Your voice matters here. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments.